the Mother's Day edition of It Only Takes One Person. What did you do this Mother's Day? I started mine with breakfast in bed, which, let's be honest, is always a bit of a juggle, isn't it? With crumbs and cups of tea or coffee balancing. But the kids love it, don't they? They absolutely love doing that for you. And then what did I do? I spent the morning decorating and the afternoon cooking, but that was all my choice. I wanted to get the painting done. I wanted to feel like I was moving that on for us. And also, I wanted everyone round in the afternoon. I cooked a roast for the extended family, had my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, nephews, sister, my dad, and us. The house was full. It was a bit chaotic, it was a bit noisy, but do you know what? It was full of love, it was full of laughs, and it got me thinking about my mum. I know Mother's Day can feel tricky for some. It's a complicated one, isn't it? For some people, it's very joyful. For others, it's painful for many reasons. For some, there might be a distance, and others, there's often a loss. But for many, it's a mix of all of it. And I think sometimes when we focus on the everyday things mums do, the lunches, the lifts, the routines, have you brushed your teeth kind of moments, that's what we think about. But today I found myself thinking about something different. Not the everyday, but the courage. And the idea in this podcast that it only takes one person to change the direction of a life, or one person to make a different choice, one person to say, this isn't how my story ends. Because my mum, she was one of those people. And she was just 22. She emigrated to South Africa with her then new hubby. And now you've got to remember at this time, early 70s, this wasn't, people didn't go to Spain on holiday. There wasn't a phone in the household. I know at that time there was one phone in my nana's entire street. So if a phone call came, somebody would run down, which would be costing money, to hang on the phone on the other end, run down to my nana in the hope that she was in to get her to run to a neighbour's house. It was a time we didn't go to Spain on holiday, and my mum had a one-way ticket, a real leap of faith. She went with then her new husband, my father, who was an electrician, and they were part of building something, the foundations of a newly developing country, where they went to help put in the infrastructure, put in electricity in, put in phone lines in, all things like that. And they stayed with some people from work and they made friends, and then eventually they built their own house. Now, this house was on a plot of land that they saved and saved for, and the building of the house was slow. And my dad, Ian, used to have to work away quite a bit. So he would go to a certain part of South Africa and spend the week there putting in the electric lines and stuff. But because he was an electrician and he was quite canny, they used to hook their electric up to the mains. And so if there was an inspection, they used to have to climb the telegraph pole and unhook it so they didn't get in trouble. Basically, he was stealing electric because he could, he knew how. And because they were building, they didn't have a lot of money. So if he was away, my mum used to have to do that. She used to have to run up the telegraph pole, unhook it so that they didn't get in trouble. Hilarious. There is lots and lots of stories of courage and bravery and probably stupidity that I have from those times. Anyway, back to the story. They built their house, they created a life, and they built a community around them, many of which I am still in touch with. So I have a godmother, Pippa, who actually works here in London now. I have family friends in which were my mum's best friends there in Ken and Sheila, people like that. And I also have family there, and my father Ian is still there. So a few years later, I came along But within a couple of years, the marriage broke down, and she had a decision to make, to stay or to come home. And she chose to come back to England. A very courageous decision at the time as a single mum in the early 70s with a toddler and a suitcase full of my clothes. Now, where my grandparents lived was a small working class town. It was based around steel. We had steelworks and we had the margarine works in this little town. But it was the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. She came from a big family, well known, rooted in the community. My granddad worked in the steelworks. I had aunties working in the margarine works, and I had my nana who used to run the pubs in the local area. So if a pub wasn't doing very well, she would go in, turn it around, move on to the next one. So you can imagine everyone knew my family. Now, she came back to that where everyone knew her. She came back to that family that loved her, but she came back to a community that knew everything about her. So not only with a marriage that hadn't worked out, which wasn't her fault, by the way, but as a single parent, people talked. There was judgment, assumptions, a sense of who did she think she was going off like that? And yet she knew that's what it would be like before she came back. And she came back anyway. I often think now, what if she hadn't? What would my life look like if she'd have chosen the easier option? Because staying would have been easier. There would have been less judgment, less explaining, less starting again. But it wouldn't have been happier. And she didn't choose the easy path. In fact, what she chose wasn't easy at all. She came back to debt because she had to ask my granddad for the money to come home. And at that time, the flights were about £2,000, I believe, which in today's money is about 20 grand. And he, at that time, everybody got paid in cash. You got a little brown envelope on a Friday, and you didn't really have bank accounts. So he had to go to a local bank manager and say, I need to get Leslie home. Can I get a bank loan? It was courage all round, really. So he'd taken out that bank loan for the first time in his life to bring his daughter and granddaughter home, and she paid him back every penny. She came back rebuilding everything from scratch. But she also came back to family, to support, to love, to connection. And for me, that changed everything because I grew up surrounded by people who knew me, who loved me, who heard me. And all that came from one decision. As much as those people judged, as much as those people talked about Leslie, the single mom, when my mum was out working to try and build a life for me and her, I would be with my nana. And we would go what we call down the road. And that's like going into the little town. So we would walk into town, see my great nana, her mum, and we would meet different people on the way. We would stop and have conversations all the time. What would be a 10-minute journey would probably take us half an hour because everybody would stop and talk. Now, what's really funny is, and I do say this story in my book right at the beginning, because I think community is everything in when a child is growing up, is that if I did something wrong, was also the same. But if I fell, there would have been a crowd of adults around me. And whether they knew my name or not, they knew who I belonged to. So over my head, I would have heard, that's Margaret's granddaughter, or that's Leslie's daughter. And I would have got help and support immediately. I would have got helped home. They would have found wherever I was. Now, don't think that if I'd have done something wrong, that wouldn't have happened. That news would have got back to my grandparents quicker than I could have. but how amazing it keeps you to account as a young person, but also somebody has your back even if you don't know their name. And all of that community, the the love, the life that I had growing up with cousins where I could stretch my boundaries and work out how far I could go, work out who I was in comparison to them. The learning all the songs and dances to Motown because of my Auntie Pat, who I adored. Because when my mum came home, one of the things I haven't told you is that most of her siblings were still at home because she was the eldest. She left. They were still at home. And so when we came back, we had to share a bed with my Auntie Pat. Me, my Auntie Pat, it was definitely that and the little one roll over scenario. But I grew up with lots of love. And do you know what? It only takes that one decision. All of that changed for me in that one decision my mum made. That one person choosing something different. One person who chose happiness over appearances. One person who chose long-term well-being over short-term ease. And one person who says this might be harder, but it's going to be better, a better life. And as a mum now, I look back and I don't just see what she did, I feel it. The courage that it must have taken, not just to go, but to come back, to walk back to a place where people had opinions, where she had to start again from scratch, but this time with a child. And she chose that harder life because she knew she deserved a happier one. And that's what I think we don't always talk about on days like Mother's Day. It's not just the everyday things, although we are thankful for them. It's about the decisions that shape a family, the quiet bravery, the moments when someone breaks a pattern and changes everything for the people who come after them. This is not an easy one. By God, I know it's not an easy one. But for those who have the courage, it is amazing. So today, if mothers felt lovely for you, I'm so glad. If it felt heavy or complicated or brought up feelings you weren't expecting, that's okay too. Because motherhood and our relationships with our mums aren't always simple. But maybe if you're listening to this today, you can also notice something deeper. The one person who made a different choice, maybe the one person who changed your path, your life. Because for me, that was my mum, Leslie. Thank you for listening today. If you want to tell me a story about your mum, if you want to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out. I'd love to hear about that one person. One of the reasons that we started this series is because we're getting feedback of our coaches and the young people's lives that we're changing by being there for them, or the families saying, thanks, you've changed our life. And it's not because we're bragging. It's not because we're saying we're the ones who can change your life, but simply we want to recognize those people in your life that make a change, that might change the way that you are, that might just one simple decision, one simple sentence like Ruby's podcast last week from Jack, the youth worker, and that changed her life completely. So tell us, hit email on the newsletter, email in to ashley@theresilientkid.co.uk and tell us about that one person. Or if you want to become a coach and have a franchise of your own of The Resilient Kid, then please get in touch because by God, we need more people that will see and hear young people. Take care, everyone, and lots of love.